Hey everyone, Douglas here, and welcome back to the MMT Macro Trader live stream. Sorry about the delay. I don't know what's going on. I pay an exorbitant amount for gig speed internet, and I'm having connection issues. I'm only getting like 30 megs up right now, and
The price ain't right then.
yeah. So.
Excellent.
Anyway, welcome to the live stream, everyone. Thanks for holding on while we get things figured out. But we're live. We're finally live. Bijou, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, man. Good.
Good.
Had a bit of a wild week of reading and things.
Yeah.
Kind of like I lived a whole lifetime in a week. One of those weeks where you're digging into all sorts of things, and it's like, whoa, that was a whole lifetime that just went by in a week.
Is that because you read my deep learning tweet and you're like, wow, I just learned everything in one lifetime that a man could learn by reading this one tweet? No.
Well, that was only half of it. That wasn't even half of it. So much else going on. It's reading. See, guys, Douglas says he doesn't read too much. Obviously, he does, but but reading is firstly a great way to get to sleep. But unfortunately, if you get a good book, it's like also a great way to stay awake, lose sleep. But it does have that. Reading has that quality of you get immersed into something more than if you're just on a YouTube thing or something you can click off, because you have to stay with the reading, otherwise there's no payoff for it, right? So you sort of force yourself to almost dig into it. And I'm reading about the CIA and MK Ultra and stuff, and the Dulles brothers, and I'm trying to understand. This is really coming from MMT. Really, everything I do is MMT or physics, right? Quantum scale or the macro scale. But it's trying to understand power and politics and that, because I see a major obstacle to human prosperity being. I think we cut out there for a bit.
Yeah.
Anyway,
we might be cutting in and out. Yeah.
If we're cutting it out, you could just interpolate our speech. Or maybe Google will do it for us. Anyway, so yeah, just trying to understand the hard problem of MMT that I wrote about or talked about last week. Is something that I think as an MMT aware person, you can't ignore. You can't just go around trading the market using MMT to benefit yourself when you really have a social or moral obligation, I think, to try and educate other people and improve all of society. Because ultimately it improves our lives if the rest of the society is getting on well as well. So it's like increasing returns to prosperity in a way. Getting out of the Pareto dynamics. So that led me in all sorts of directions. So one was looking at the Dulles brothers' history, a great book called the Devil's Chessboard. And that's the editor of Salon.com. I think he wrote that. And the other one was came across, actually it was a kind of confluence. I think it's the algorithm sometimes working in our favor. Like, because I've got connected to people like Douglas and all sorts of MMTers from all around the spectrum, and Ty Keynes and Steve Keen and so there's this economist Blair Fix. I think he's Canadian. Is that right, Ty? Anyway, so he just popped up. He doesn't often pop up in my feed, but I wasn't following him. Just popped up though, and then it led me down this path to read stuff and read papers from this guy Samuel Bowles. It's really fascinating stuff, which I could talk about later maybe. But so it was like like sometimes you just have those weeks where you feel like you've lived a whole lifetime, empathizing with people in history who have just struggled, had no idea what's happening in the world around them. But it's like massive power brokers and the power elite moving just ordinary people around, almost like pawns on a chessboard. And it's a pretty wild ride sometimes reading some of the history. I'm not a history buff. I just, this is just for all try to understand politics and power and try to figure out what the heck we're going to do to move MMT up in public consciousness. So yeah, it's the summary.
I like it. I like it. While you did that summary, I tried to get my chat and everything going up. Guys, just so you know, everyone who's watching, I'm seeing my bit rate kind of jump around. I'm sorry if the stream is not looking great on your end, but I do see chat messages and whatnot coming on in. So yeah, if you are here, make sure you say hi, hit the like button, all that good sort of stuff. If you're somehow here and you're not subscribed, get subscribed. Let's see. Yeah, again, sorry about the rocky start, but for those of you who are here, yeah, welcome. Glad you are all here. I'm still getting all everything set up as we get things underway. Let's see. Top of the order for things to talk about is on Saturday at noontime, my time. That's noon Eastern, I believe. I think I'm going to be on Steve Keen and Friends. So if you're not subscribed to Steve Keen and you're watching this somehow, go get subscribed to Steve Keen. Hopefully it'll be a good time over there with Steve and Ty, I believe, will be on as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. What else? I'm not hearing Bijou, so I'm a little worried now.
Sorry.
Okay, good. All right, so Bijou's still in.
I mute my microphone on the meet. So yeah, sometimes
okay.
if I type in the chat, I don't want them to hear my keyboard clanking away. I can hear you.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I'll be on this weekend with Ty and Steve, and then Ty. Will there be I guess what would be a fourth person on the show as well? I think they have two kind of co-hosts. So yeah, I don't know who's all going to be on, but I'm excited to go ahead and do that with the gang over there, and that was actually part of the reason too why I really pushed to get the deep learning tweet out that I did this week, so we can have some fresh stuff to talk about. That was one of the projects I've been working on. We've talked about it here during the Daniel Sanderson. Yeah, we've talked about it during the live stream. If you have any questions, I can actually probably just bring that up real quick. Give me just a second here. Go ahead and transition. Yeah, so I finally kind of I put a lot of effort into getting these tweets right, because I try and structure them in a way that I know they'll get some traction to the broader audience too, not just to kind of those of us who are kind of the real nerds. But yeah, I really wanted to get this out. It's been well received, I think, and I really think this is, we've talked about this during the live stream in the past. So if you're new here and you have any questions on this, by all means, fire them away. But I've kind of gone over in detail a few times now some of the ideas with this whole concept that we're doing. But I'm really excited by how well it was received. And at this point, I really haven't received any feedback yet. That's like, holy crap, we did something way wrong here. So far so good. The one bit of feedback that we have received that's definitely worth touching on right now was one of the thoughts was that the model's just way overfit, and I put in an extensive amount of time and testing and parameters to ensure that this thing wasn't overfit. If you're familiar with deep learning, overfitting, I mean, deep learning can cheat. If you want it to, you can get it to cheat. And then when it finally makes the right, when it finally makes the call you need it to make in real time, it's just going to do terrible. Obviously, that's what you want. That's not what you want. So I put in a lot of safeguards to make sure this thing wasn't overfitting. With the main idea, and again, I've been over this quite a few times, but we'll say it again. The main idea of this was really, is there any juice in the MMT data? Is there any juice in really the sectoral balance data to get out of the data when we squeeze it to a certain extent? I feel like the neural network is what's kind of doing the squeezing, if you will. Henrik did give me some very helpful feedback. He took a few screenshots off his phone and told me that I just had to be wrong because he has to be right. So I did note, Ty, you want me just to dive right into it, man, and you're actually gonna get
open up that thread. Let's have an inspection.
I gotta tell you, some of their feedback too. It's getting a little bit better, because what are they gonna say? Here's my screenshot. I don't know.
Well, this is why the structured tweet is probably pretty good. It does sort of scrape. It does kind of peck at the nerves or sensitivities of these nerds. which I think is a good thing because at least they have to think a little bit about why they think we're wrong or why they're wrong, why they
Yeah.
think they're right.
Yeah.
That can't hurt. I mean, maybe they never will pick up on MMT or anything, but as a related thing, one of the other things I did in my whole one lifetime in a week thing is I like to go back to sometimes look at Nassim Taleb just because I like the statistics, and he's one of the best philosophy of statistics writers that I've ever read. He actually really says John Maynard Keynes is a genius. Is it Keynes or Keynes? Ty? I don't know. I should put it into Google Pronounce or something. But yeah, he there's a few things I came across that like I must have read like a decade ago or so, but they're actually quite MMT-ish. Governments can't ever be forced to default on their debt, and so treasury
Hold on.
bonds are a safe.
Nassim Taleb was saying this?
Nassim Nicholas Taleb.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no kidding. Because I've seen him say weird things about debt elsewhere, like he doesn't seem to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought I was under
He
the
understands. I
impression-
think that debt is bad. Like, yeah, private debt is bad, but he doesn't understand that public debt is the opposite. At least I thought he didn't understand. I don't kind of harass the guy, but I just like his philosophy and on statistics and that.
Yeah.
And risk.
Yeah.
And so he's I forgot what I was going to say. It was related to your. I was related to Henrik. I guess what I'm saying is that if you just have an open mind and prepared to think and learn about things, then these structured tweets that you're sending out, they may have some use. However, on my little note page today, I've also got concerns about collectivism and internet activism, which maybe talk about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Keynes in the UK. Oh, okay. So there's like what's NA?
North America.
North America is Keynes and UK is Keynes.
Okay. So I need to say
Thanks,
Keynes.
man.
I need to say Keynes. Okay. That's good to know. That's good to know. Real quick too, and then we can move on to bigger and better things. All the research, all the Jupyter notebooks, everything I did post on the Patreon for every tier over on the Patreon site. So if that's something that you are possibly interested in, all three tiers, that includes the supporter tier. And give me 1 second here. Yeah, so that's all up over on the Patreon page for everyone to check out if you want to support us. Bijou and I will eventually get a public GitHub put up, and this will all be anything that I deem academic will be published on the public GitHub when we kind of finally get around to it. Hopefully you can understand why, the efforts that we want to put in right now are just to continue the stuff that we want to build. But the public GitHub will be something. But if you want access to it now, it's absolutely yours. Everything's up there, and it's yours once you have it. Do whatever you want with it. I'm done with it. If you want to run with it, go ahead and do so. But check that out over on the Patreon page if you want to support us. But again, I want to make it very clear, and this was part of the agreement Bijou and I had when we kind of started up as well, is that the academic stuff is for academic purpose, and if you want to gain an edge on markets by that sort of research that we're doing, obviously we're going to make that we're going to charge for that to kind of support our bigger endeavor. But eventually, anything we do that's of any academic flavor will be public. But if you want early access, you can get that over at the Patreon page, and also support what we're doing. So there's that, and again, if on the deep learning neural network, if you have any questions as the stream goes on, you want to swing back to that. We can do. Yes, actually, Ty, that is correct. My name is in fact Douglas MMT Macro Trader.
You have to change that by deed poll because he used to be a screaming right-wing libertarian.
Yeah, I had to. Yeah, exactly. I had to change my last name. I have reasons that I try and keep my last name to myself. I do have a professional career, and there are enough goofballs out there. It wouldn't be there's a few people who know.
Minimize the doxing.
Who know who I truly am.
Especially you're in your crazy US of A.
Yes, yes. But in due time, you guys will find out who I really am. For all you know, with my AI powers, this is not my real face. I've been doing.
It's not your face.
I've been doing
I
a
can't
filter.
believe that.
Yeah. I'm far better looking than this mug. And let's see some other things I wanted to touch on today. Actually, Ty, one of the things that I was going to touch on, and you're going to go ahead. Yes, I am bad. I'm Batman. I would be. Well, yeah. You guys tell me, chat. You tell me who was the best Batman. Who is your Batman of choice, and then I will tell you the correct answer.
Well, already into this before the market stuff.
Yeah, that'll come up at the end. Yeah. We'll get back to that. But in the meantime, chat, who was? Well, no, not who. I mean, who is the best Batman? Correct answer only, and then we can swing back to that later.
Answer.
Ty, what I was going to go on before I lost my train of thought with the Batman sidetrack is one of the things I did want to talk about today, and I'll just get right into it. In terms of some of my trolls that get into my Twitter threads, is the data that we've been seeing come out in the market. So we're going to start a little market discussion, and give me a second to get the Chrome tab pulled up. Ben Affleck, shit. Come on, man. Right out of the gate. Okay, better than expected. One of the things I wanted to start with is to go over the data we've seen over the last month through February, and just kind of point out that clearly something is wrong with these rate hikes, and I want to drive home a series of tweets that I keep doing about better than expected, hopefully clarify them a little bit. Because I think the qualification that I want to put out here, and Bijou, feel free to kind of cut me off at any minute or at any moment here, but I think the qualification that I want to point out here is that when I say better than expected, I don't mean that we have like a great economy or the perfect economy, or that high interest rates are really making this economy better. All I'm saying is there is an expectation, and this is the most important point right here that I want to make. There is an expectation by the mainstream, and their expectation is off by miles right now. I mean, their expectation is off. I can't think of an analogy off the top of my head, but there's some physics analogy that's there that maybe Bijou can fill in. They're off by a lot. I mean, they're predicting a planet should be somewhere, and it's nowhere to be found. Yeah. And that's what I mean when I'm saying better than expected. It's not the data that I care about per se, where anything is at. I mean, although we'll look at some in just a second, it's where the expectations are and why the hell no one
just to interject real quick.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
But so where do you get your idea of what the expectations are from? Is there a place?
Good question. There are polls and whatnot, consensus.
Polls.
Yeah. I don't know if you can see the stream, but here is the consensus agreement on where any given data release or any given economic release should be at.
Okay.
So these get aggregated.
That's a survey.
That's a survey.
Is it?
Yeah, exactly. It's a survey of market participants. Yes.
Right.
Which I'm fine with saying the economy's not where it could be at, right? And I'm not saying that high interest rates are the way to go. The point that we're trying to make is that high interest rates are not going to slow down the economy, right? They're gonna heat it up, and that is why the consensus expectation, is so important. It's not to say that we have just this roaring economy, although I mean, from some facets, from some angles, unemployment particularly. I mean, we do have a very strong economy, but it could be a hell of a lot better, and I mean, it needs to be. Anyway,
right.
I've got pulled up some data that I want to look at with regards to better than expected. Kicking things off on February 3rd, we had unemployment come out way better than expected in terms of where they thought it was going to be at. Non-farm payrolls at the beginning of February, just that was the 517 versus the 185. huge blowout there. That same day, we had ISM manufacturing come in better than expected. We had a little bit further down on the 14th, we had inflation come out hotter than expected. A little bit later, the very next day was retail sales that absolutely sprung higher, way better. And again, it was better than expected, and it's the expectation that matters. PCE on the 24th PCE, way better than expected. PCE is what apparently what the Fed looks at. That's their kind of measure of inflation. And then finally on Monday this week, we had pending home sales it's screaming higher. And as one of my Twitter trolls pointed out, look, they're still down 25% or 24.1% from last year, which is, again, I'm not making the argument that we're in the Goldilocks economy. My point is, the consensus expectation was 28% down from a year ago, and we're at 24% down from a year ago. That's a huge gap between expectation and reality. And it's no surprise. I mean, it's no surprise to any of us in the heterodox MMT world because the interest rate thing, they just got it backwards. So those are my thoughts. I've kind of kicked things off market-wise.
Tell me, if someone had a fair, view of all of this, do you think you'd be able to sort of say that it's like trickle down versus trickle up? I know that's too simplistic to say, maybe, but
yeah, actually, I mean, I think that's exactly what it would be. It would be a trickle down, right? Because Warren's made the comment, and I think I've pieced together what he's saying. He's so good with his one-liner tweets, and I'm like, ooh, do I have it right? But he's made the comment that it's, and this has been a tricky part in my mind, because let me set up the whole picture here. Let me set up the whole kind of sequence. Higher interest rates mean higher future costs, right? So the cost of doing business in the future is gonna go higher. That means employees are gonna demand higher wages, all that sort of stuff, right? So that all has to get baked in. The cost of money itself goes up, obviously. And the reason that doesn't bend the economy, break the economy, is because the income necessary to support that higher price structure comes via the channel of the interest payment. Now the question is, but how does that actually get to the workers, right? Like
to the wages, so how does they can pay their higher costs?
Exactly. And I think that's it. I think it's a trickle down effect, because it will put pressure on what we'll call it the capitalist in the proper sense to let some of that trickle down, right? And when you're already in a situation where you have a very hot labor market, right, and the opportunities are there to leave, then there has to be an immediate response to the call for higher wages, right?
Yeah.
And I think the other thing too that's important when you get the entire sequence right is businesses don't want to lose, right? I mean, businesses are still going to be competitive. They still need to make a profit. They can't take an inning off and let things sort out, right? There's still the competition that's taking place. And so they're driven to continue to spend aggressively. And it also, all competition is, it is, if you take an inning off, someone's going to take that opportunity to kind of strike at, whatever weakness. So I think that's part of that's part of the story, and why it's able to get funneled in a trickle down sort of way down to the workers. That'd be my theory.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. As long as people are willing to spend, right, you're going to get a pretty decent hot economy. And so whether the government's injection is right, at the top end of town, as Bill Mitchell would say, as long as some of that's getting spent, right, it's probably a very inefficient way to do it, right? But as long as some of it's getting spent, wages are going to catch up, even though the real wages tragically it was declining. It may have been just rising recently due to maybe some of the supply constraints easing. But I see this as all a sort of Fed and everyone just turning up the heater a little bit on the economy, actually making it a little bit hotter, as long as people are prepared to spend. So if you suddenly had some sort of psychological shift towards savings behavior and writing down debts, then you'd see some sort of contraction of spending drops off. So the interesting thing about this period is that the high interest rates not necessarily hurting everyone in the same way, and you got to factor in that they're inflation discounted as well, so that the real interest rate maybe isn't that big, and so it's creating in my mind just. I imagine this as it's just a narrative, right? I don't have much data to support it, except for what you tell me. But in my mind, it's creating a little bit of a cash as being a hot potato effect, like a geisel currency.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
If you think inflation, if you think prices are going to go up for some, medium ticket items, you buy now because you don't want to pay the higher price later, and then you earn the income at the higher wage level, which may be a bit dodgy to rely upon, but wage level has to rise eventually, otherwise firms don't make sales. So capitalism runs on sales, and so if you have too much saving behavior, then you'll get a crunch. But as long as people are prepared to spend, take out a credit card or whatever, temporarily at least, you can see a very hot economy. The problem is, I think, is like we keep saying, the debt ceiling later on, maybe some big tax payment months as the as the economy seems to get hotter and hotter, you also get increasing tax receipts. So automatically, so that could be a problem later on as well.
Yeah.
And so it's all a little bit fragile, I'd say. It's hot, but it's fragile hot. It's not a good hot. It's not the government's, good sound wise fiscal policy just boosting lower wages and boosting things from the bottom and keeping things simmering nice and gentle. It's more of a like a Minsky nervous type of hot.
Let me I have a thought here. Let me pull up Fred. Going back to the Gessel currency and going back to kind of the velocity, making money, kind of a hot potato here. I have to do M2. I wish they still had M3 velocity money. Okay, let's think this through. Just kind of a thought experiment. Let's use new car sales, because in the U.S. car inventory for a very long time was very slim due to supply chain issues. Right, it was very hard to find a new car. Right, so if you have sudden pressure, upward price pressure, and you had a supply constraint like with cars, right? And you knew you needed a new car, you will be fast. I mean, we were actually in this. I was personally in this situation where I went through my entire hometown. I mean, I stopped. This was a year and a half ago, and I stopped at every dealership one day. I think people looked at me like I was a complete idiot, and I'm like, listen, because we have a nice minivan. It runs. We literally just needed. We decided to donate our one car. I just needed. A 2-year lease, the cheapest one I could find. And so I went into every dealership, and I'm just like, listen, what's the cheapest car you have? I will do it today. And don't give me any, I don't even want to talk to you. Just tell me. It is apparently not the way to do it, because the salespeople didn't appreciate that.
I don't get the sales pitch training.
But the question is, there were probably a lot of people in my situation who were doing something very similar, right? I mean, it was just you buy immediately. That makes the currency hot, right? I mean, that makes that kicks velocity higher. When and I think the point I'm trying to make is, when there is a supply constraint, that's the part that that kind of keeps things hot, because everyone knows, hey, I need to get this. It's far more limited than it ever has been, and so there is this turnover of the currency that happens faster, on top of the higher velocity of money that gets created from the higher interest rates to begin with. So I mean, I think it's like a double effect when you have a supply constraint issue and higher interest rates. I can show you what I'm talking about with at least the interest rates. I have velocity of money pulled up, percent change from a year ago. It looks a lot better with MZM or M3, but we'll go ahead and do 10-year. I don't want any of the. Yeah, this is what I want. They always change their names on these series on the Fred.
Right.
It's not helpful.
Assuming most of our chat knows the difference, but MZM and money is zero maturity, so more like cash, and M2 and cash plus deposits. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. To be quite honest, I couldn't tell you exactly what's in M2 versus.
Yeah, but in any case, the velocity kind of shows you what's the transaction.
So I've always been convinced. I have percent change. I mean, I laid these over percent change. I've always been relatively convinced by my interocular abilities here that it's really the change in the interest rate that's driving the change in velocity. So if you have a higher interest rate, that's going to increase the velocity of money. And you can see this here. And actually, it stands out a little bit better when I just do what the actual interest rate is.
That's true for a certain regime when you're in a monetarist type of regime, right?
Yes. If there were reserve constraints, I don't think this would hold up. Yeah, I actually do think you would see maybe a short run boost, but then you would get a collapse of the money supply. If I'm thinking through it correctly. Yeah, I think so.
That's what's happening there.
Yeah, I just overlaid. I just changed it out of rate of change for the yield price. But the big point that I'm trying to make here is actually maybe it does look better as a percent change from a year ago on both. It's pretty clear to me that velocity of money is a function of not so much inflation, but of the term structure prices via the interest rate. So. I think you're onto something. It's something I've thought through a few times as well, and I think we're in agreement here. I think the higher interest rate is doing a couple things. It's creating this trickle-down effect. It's also setting the price structure higher. I also think on top of that, you have the constraints still in the supply chain side of things, and I think there is a bit of a I don't even think it has to be. See, and here's the thing: is I don't even think it has to be a psychological thing where people are like, oh, inflation to tomorrow's price is going to be higher. I think it can just be a function of the higher price structure creates the need, not the psychological need, but just the supply disappears, and so it's more of a supply need, right? Like
Right.
what I want tomorrow might not be there. So that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah. Well, with with loans create deposits, if you're prepared to understand that your income tomorrow can pay off your debt that you take out today, then like you say, maybe people aren't making rational decisions about it all. But most people who have jobs, who have an income, can almost unconsciously make that decision that I don't care about the interest rate. I'll just keep paying groceries, keep buying. Got to eat to live and all that sort of thing. And that can go on for a long time.
Yeah.
But my question was, it's like, what would you say? Like, I can't really process this graph immediately in real time. But what about the change, a sudden change in interest rate, as compared to a constant like high interest rate?
Oh,
would you say that has a more drastic or nuanced effect than? Because what I'm thinking is, if you had a permanent zero interest rate, what happens to the velocity of money then? So then you're talking about just commercial bank lending and so on. That can just be a constant sort of pricing risk type of situation. I know that's counterfactual. It's not the current environment we're in. I was just interested in.
Yeah, I mean, we did have for 10 years we had
for 10 years
we had an effective zero rate during that time period. Let me take this chart off here, and let me just put on velocity of money. I mean, it just fell straight down over time in a pretty straight line, actually, during that 10-year period. So that's how it actually played out. I mean, that's what I would expect.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's what I think too. It's like you kind of just got a plastic bag on the head of the economy in that sense, because you're running a permanent zero rate, which is anti-inflation bias, if you like, and you're turning yourself into Japan if you're not prepared to spend on the jobs or infrastructure side of things.
So
you create the fiscal space, right, by permanent zero interest rate, but then you don't fill it. So obviously your velocity of money is going to go down.
So I was, I'm thinking this through right now, because I think you would want, in a perfect world, you have a job guarantee. Josh, just for the record, I posted this quite a few times. I don't think it clicks for people because they don't have the MMT structure, the MMT framework in mind. But I agree. I mean, it's this will be one of the projects I work on in the not too distant future. But if going back to the perfect world scenario, if we had a job guarantee, right, we had a government that spent on infrastructure and all that sort of stuff. We had a very robust private sector that was at topped out employment, right? Our dream scenario, 0% interest rates. I think the policy decision you would have to make, because I think in that world you'd want the velocity of money higher, and I think the policy decision you'd have to make to achieve that is get rid of any sort of consumption tax. I mean, if anything, it should be it should be an anti-consumption tax, right? I mean, you should almost get credits at the end of the year if you spent everything like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the whole MMT thing is that people are going to just clip sound bites from us and sort of attack us on. But you got to be pro-inflation. When you've got a fiat floating currency, you have to be pro-inflation. There's no downside unless it's like regressive, like it's just pure rentier income or UBI, or just pure giveaways, pure helicopter money.
Yeah.
Or if it's like just total corruption, like you just. But if it's based in investment in the real economy, and the government is just letting the deficit float, and just instead, don't target the deficit, just the meaningless residual, just target full employment, but make sure they're non-bullshit jobs to whatever extent that's possible. Not completely 100% possible to eliminate bullshit jobs, but I think Sam Levy wrote a good article on this way back or a few years ago, and it's like inflation actually helps eliminate bullshit jobs because there's a premium. Real output rather than UBI type.
Yeah.
Just employ someone for the hell of it. It's no. When you're pushing full employment, employers regard people who are not productive as a bit of a waste. And plus, they're making sales.
That's a good.
Because we've got a hot economy. They're making sales, and so why do they need this dead weight? Get rid of it. Get rid of those employees, and but again, it all comes together with an MMT perspective, because getting rid of an employee is not doing a good job is probably beneficial to them if there's a job guarantee or expanded public sector hiring for them to go into and then
go find something productive to do. Yeah.
So all this massive waste that we've got going on now with the neoliberal version of capitalism is just all completely pointless.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's the other thing I did in my last week of living a whole lifetime in a week is going back and listening to Philip Moralski. I think he's the best. His writing is very sort of highfalutin, lots of Shakespearean like vocabulary type stuff. But just try and listen to some of his talks or there's a podcast.
I'm sorry, what's his name?
Philip Moralski.
Okay.
He's probably the best person with the best understanding of neoliberalism that I've come across. And yeah, it's pretty fascinating to listen to him, and it just jives with the MMT, like the whole thing about how it's just the insanity of neoliberal version of capitalism is just incredibly. I mean, it's eye-opening the way he describes how neoliberalism was developed with the Mont Pelerin Society and all the think tanks and all that, and they really were smart in their strategizing. How to get neoliberalism. I mean, they were true believers in a sense. They weren't just out to screw workers or anything. They genuinely believed that they were going to get rid of fascism, and not understanding that actual austerity, which is kind of what they're promoting, leads to fascism. Because it just creates a terrible social conditions. So Philip Miralski was the other guy.
Okay. I just looked him recently. Up. I just looked him up. He was born just south of me. Not too far south. I mean, went to University of Michigan, so he's a fellow Michigander.
I think it's just one L in there.
One L. Maybe I got the wrong. Yeah, I think I got the right guy. As a historian, philosopher of economic thought at the University of Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Graduated from.
I'm not sure if he's MMT aware, but he definitely is the best to listen to on the whole history of neoliberalism.
Yeah.
And how it's a sort of left-wing and right-wing project and centrist. It's every. Well, I mean, I guess it's not extreme left. The left wingers have always been sort of against neoliberalism, but it's a centre-left to far-right ideology, and they play off each other.
Yeah.
So the right-wingers will come to power and do deficit spending on wars, and then the centrists will come into power and do austerity in order for the right wingers to go back into power.
Hold on, you're saying you're saying the right wingers came in and spent on war?
Oh yeah, well you could probably knock me back on that. I mean, Tony Blair.
Last I checked, the biggest paycheck we've handed out ever for war since World War II has been to Ukraine. Which I mean, not to say it isn't a justified spending, but we're spending a lot on it.
That's the most recent. You can point to the most recent high-tech war, and you're going to
will always be
the cost. Yeah,
it will always be
the dollar cost to kill one of the enemy tends to go up over time.
Yeah.
Less human soldiers and more high-tech missiles and things. So it's all just complete waste of resources. But anyway, he's good on that. He talks about the whole interplay and dynamics of all these liberal sort of think tanks and that, and how they all just feed on each other and infest the universities. And it's not even like it's not even a great big conspiracy of lizard people or anything. It's just ordinary people who came together. The Mont Pelerin Society is closed membership, right? But it's not like they hide or anything. It's just a closed membership, because ultimately what Miralski would say is they actually don't trust democracy. That's the big thing. So they want everyone to think there is a democracy, but they have their own ideas and ways of messing with the markets, privatizing things strategically, contracting out a lot of work to the private sector. And, I think one of the most powerful tools, intellectual tools to overcoming neoliberalism is MMT, actually. But anyway, that's the other thing that I was talking about. Forget how I got onto that, but it had something to do with our MMT story of in an ideal world, if we had policy controls to we could just have such a much more improved, prosperous society. The basic idea. And the inflation, you sort of want to be a little bit pro-inflation rather than deflation. If you've got a fiat currency floating exchange rate, why not? It's like you can't give me an argument that deflation is even useful in that case. If you're on a gold standard for some sort of metaphysical reason, then for sure you want to pirate the gold or tax it off everyone so that you can keep the thing going. And then that's just a draconian way of doing it. People kind of rebel against it. Whereas with a fiat currency, you don't have those constraints. So you run the economy hot, but not energy hot. Not energy hot. You run it like monetarily hot. So
yes.
You're doing good things for people. And
It is one of the things I would love to talk to an Austrian economist, and really get their take on why they want some back currency, because it always seems to me like the effort that it would take, the efforts that it takes to confiscate wealth to back a currency, assuming if you define wealth as some sort of asset like gold or something like
Assets,
that, right?
yeah. Right.
Is a far more intrusive endeavor than just saying, hey, if you have nothing better to do and you want to build a road for everybody, we'll pay you top dollar and give you know what I'm saying? And we'll give
keep
you
the savings, dude.
We'll give you an 18-month contract. We'll make sure you have benefits during that time, and guaranteed payment. Versus we're actually going to take your gold because we need to go fight a war. I don't know.
Don't keep the change. Let me tax all of that back, and because I'm imposing a gold constraint on myself or currency peg. Just makes no sense.
I would like to pick their brain on that. I don't know. I started going down the trail, and I can't complete it. And then I decided, that's a good question, Josh. How would have I answered my own question? I don't know. I got to get myself back in the mindset. Because
it's painful. It's a painful exercise to do that.
I don't know. I think I probably. Okay, here's what it is, though. The minute I realized truly what it meant to have a floating currency, right? I think there was no going back for me. I don't. I think that would have been it. I think that would have been my hang up, right? I think I would have, and I never thought it. This is the other embarrassing thing. I don't think I ever thought it through to its conclusion. Well, where the hell did the government get its money to spend, right? Because I really think I thought they had to tax it, and I don't know where I don't know how I would have pieced together that businesses would have got that money in the first place. Good question, Josh.
Sometimes this things goes back to your parents. So my parents were,
I was deserted at a young age, and I was out on my own. I was out on my
psychology here.
Well, actually,
sometimes it does. Like your preconceived ideas, of
how
things work. Like, I remember my parents from a very early age. They were just like, you got to spend your money, otherwise it's kind of not useful. And so they weren't big savers. Like, they understood the importance of saving for some things, right? Retirement and what have you. But my mother was always we'll have these post office bonds or these government bonds, and just have a little account for your kids. And the understanding was not that we're giving the government our money by buying these bonds, but it was just a saving vehicle. It was basically supporting interest rates. And then the other thing, my father, who was an accountant, and he had interest in economics, but didn't become his profession. He did other things, but when he exposed me first to some of the economics textbooks, I remember having a look at the interest rates and inflation, and I just thought, so interest rates are going to be inflationary. I just immediately had the term structure prices in my head. This was I was I don't know, very young, I don't know, between 12 and 16 years old. And then I read some stuff about how that's sort of some tightening, blah, 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 the monetary story. And I just couldn't process it. I could not process the monetary story. So that's why I kind of went down physics instead of economics, because it just made no sense to me from the get-go. And it never made sense to me until I understood MMT. And I figured, okay, I was right as a little kid. It was so funny. But not that I'm a genius or anything, or precocious. It was just my parents, just some of the upbringing I had.
Yeah. I will tell you another funny story that you guys will probably just appreciate to some extent. Is part of the thing too that really got me wanting to understand. So I was trying to build a macro model, but the other thing too is I ran back in the day. I ran a Minecraft server for my kids and kind of my friend group, and I really wanted an economic system. And this would have been as I was kind of making my shift. What would that be? 2014, 15, 16 range. And I was trying to figure out, well, how could I get an economic system to work? And I, as an Austrian, I understood that it started with gold and gold mining, and I wanted an economic system in this Minecraft game. And so that really got me kind of scratching away at where money comes from. And I do remember kind of thinking eventually it kind of clicked that there's a fiat system that underlies all this no matter what. It's a system of debt. It's a system of IOUs, right? That needs to come about. So I do remember that. Yeah.
The MMT story is so refreshing too, because once you realize what the monetary system is, it's a way of supporting markets and supporting jobs and supporting the real economy.
Yes.
And that in a sense, all of the old schoolers that even the neoclassicals, right, who don't even put money in, as Steve Keen would say, money is a kind of just a numeraire they add in later. They're interested in real barter. They're interested in the barter economy. And libertarians also, the Austrians, they're interested in the real economy. And it's like, dude, MMT is renewing that vision that, yes, it's all about real resources. But you better understand the monetary system because that's how things get distributed. So if you're going to ignore bank credit and the fiat currency and the way that the government injects currency to support a growing population, it doesn't have to mine it out of the ground, for God's sake. Then you're crippling your own emphasis on the real resources and the real economy. Why are you doing this, guys? Come on. Someday I dream and hope that a lot of these libertarians will come over. That's one of the talking points I had for today. Is it actually Austrians or Marxists who have the greatest mental adjustment to make in order to grok MMT?
I really think I think it's the
you
Marxists.
said it was Austrians.
No,
you said it was Austrians who had the smallest gap.
The smallest gap. Right. Correct. I think it would be. I think it would be easier to convince.
You've got a finance bro bias there, you see, because Marxists have a humanitarian streak where they see not so much the real economy but economic justice as imperative. And so I think the gap is a different gap, but it's pretty much the same.
Okay. See. Okay. This is just me coming from my perspective. Yeah. I think there are a lot of well-meaning Austrians who really think that, if you're a leftist, you think every Austrian is Peter Schiff, right? And
kind of,
and
maybe more like Ron Paul or something.
And Peter Schiff is a grubby asshole, right? Right. And if you're in
Well, the one in my imagination is, I don't know about the guy really personally.
I mean, he probably is. Right. But I mean, he's clearly not in it for like.
Don't want you to get demonetized here for slander.
Yeah. That's my opinion.
Sure. Very well. Okay.
But if you're a right winger, and I'm gonna say, like, you really think that true freedom, like a Bob Murphy, take the Bob Murphy, right?
Bob Murphy.
He's a nice guy. I don't think he really has some good gig that's just making him, cash hand over fist, and he knows if the system goes under, right? I think he sincerely thinks this is a way to prosperity for all. They're gonna. I gotta pick a good example here of a lefty, that's just too far left, but would be held up by many as kind of the example. I can't think of anyone off the top of my head without pissing off half my audience here.
Well, all of Steve Grumbine's colleagues on Real Progressives, they're very Marxist inclined, and they just understand MMT, and they understand, the labor theory value doesn't matter.
Richard Wolff. Yes, Richard
Wolff. Yeah,
Richard Wolff would be a good example. You know who might actually be a better example? Would be.
But I don't think he's extreme enough. He accepts MMT
from like a political standpoint. He
just doesn't understand it fully.
I think people like Elizabeth Warren would come off as someone who just wants to cause pain for the sake of causing pain, right?
Centrist.
Yeah. Um, here's the bigger.
Just pick any UBI. Pick any UBI lefty. They're the ones.
Here's the bigger point that I'm trying to make. I'll bring it back to the bigger point. Is I think an Austrian is easier, because I ultimately I think there are more Austrians. I guess what I'm trying to say is at the base of both the left and the right on this picture, you have, assuming they are people who truly want what's best for society, I think it is harder to convince a Marxist-leaning person that it's really the government that, by creating the unemployment, is actually at the root of sustained exploitation by the private sector, right? The exploitation only happens because the government doesn't come in. I think that is a huge sticky switch to flip. I tell you, once it flips, they're easier to get on board. And I don't know. And this is just me because I went through the conversion of a right winger. And I really think when they can view the government not as the evil money taker, right, but instead the money creator, that you could get a government that's more focused on go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I wanted to let you finish the thought. I understand where you're coming from. There's those switches to flip, right, about the role of government. And the MMT, like if we take the MMT textbook, say, as like the Bible, if you like, the Mitchell, Ray, Watts, it's clear right up front. They say it's a government-centered approach because they're recognizing what Warren Mosley says is that MMT begins with understanding the government is, or the currency is a simple public monopoly. But you've also got to understand that, the law of the land is also essentially a public monopoly as well. Now, it can be controlled by massively elitist power, people in power. Like, you don't really have a democracy. But, MMT is a bit agnostic to that. It still doesn't matter whether it's an oligarchy that pretends to be a democracy or whether it is an actual democracy. It's still a government-centered approach. So you get different policy outcomes depending on who's in power, but it's still an MMT system in any case. And so I think equally well, a Marxist or an Austrian can understand that. And it's flipping that switch. Like the Austrians reject it because they just don't want to see a big government. And the Marxists don't mind a big governmental state as long as it's in the interests of the people. So they're very orthogonal approaches to getting at MMT. And once you get the MMT, you can still hold on to your other ideology. It doesn't mean an Austrian has to give up the idea of small government, and it doesn't mean that a Marxist has to give up the idea of meeting the public purpose. They can still accommodate the idea of having private markets. Once you understand that the government can do regulation, and an Austrian, I think the regulation though is also, I think you still would have resistance with Austrian scholars, wouldn't you? That they really don't like the regulation, even if they understand MMT. That's my understanding. Although that might be a straw man, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But so I think the chasm to bridge is about equal. I'm sticking with that until I get social science data.
Yeah,
which I'm never going to have.
You could be right. I also think there's such a deep, the Austrian movement, at least in the U.S., is also a very it's a Christian religious movement as well, right? And
really?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
I thought libertarians were a little bit more agnostic.
So
is there a distinction here between Austrian school economics and libertarians? Is that a sort
maybe
of
libertarian?
Slightly, not quite intersecting Venn diagram. Well, they're intersecting.
Yeah,
Venn diagrams.
I mean, let's. I would say, at least above south of the Bible Belt, you might have more of a conservative lean, but north of the Bible Belt, I'm not too far away from Grand Rapids, right? Like the Calvinist center of the universe. So I mean, I have a very skewed view of what that looks like. Just being, I mean, everyone in Michigan is a Calvinist, and they're all libertarian kind of Austrian economics. I mean, that is all that exists up here.
Wow.
If you're a Christian, you're in that world. So I do think too that there is also a social, let's put it this way, religious or not, there's a social skepticism about government that's very hard to get over.
Exactly.
And so there's there would be that aspect to it too.
So I'm still gonna have to wait for the data.
Well,
but I think coming from Austrian schoolers, it's easy for you to see that they can be
convinced,
flip the switch easier than a Marxist. But it's like I didn't start from that. I started from a more Baha'i faith type, just social democrat type, old school Labour Party side of things. So I don't have I think back in the past, my family would have had like sympathies with Marxists, but we're more of the sort of Menshevik type. Like we would regarded as traitors by the hardcore Marxists because we believed too much in a bit of a liberal democracy. But be that as it may, whatever the case is, I'm just saying I don't have the the deep Marxist type culture to draw experience from. So I'm kind of a neutral here and looking at both sides, and I'm seeing the chasm to get to MMT in order to promote your ideology, the one that you favor, is about equal a gap.
You're probably
once you get there, you're still the MMTs are still gonna disagree.
Yeah,
but I think that's great. I like a kind of a view on macroeconomics that permits a lot of debate and disagreement about actual policy that you can do once you understand the full policy space available.
Thomas D, there's no Republican Party left in Michigan. They've been all
right?
Oh yeah. I mean, we had a wild governor race, but they all got defeated, and then they got rid of gerrymandering, and
that's healthy
in our state for the first time in like 60 years. It's
well done.
Yeah, everything is Democrat controlled. It's pretty wild. I want to take a step back. We can get back on this topic in just a second.
No, I think that's good for now. Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to point out is we do have the Applied MMT podcast in the house. I was on their podcast a couple weeks ago. If you haven't checked it out, I think it was episode 3. So check them out, and then I will bring up again, since I had it set. Actually, let me do this. Give me a second, Chad. I'm going to type in Applied MMT.
There used to be Pocket Change. That was also good.
Yes.
They've got a back library of episodes as well.
So once they understood how to trade with MMT, they had more than just Pocket Change, so they were able to change their name. Let me transition to this window real quick. Episode 3 right there. I think that was me. Yeah, that was my episode. So check them out. They also have, they're on quite a few different platforms as well. Actually, I think you can just Google Applied MMT Podcast and they have a website that comes up. And then since we're getting a few more viewers as well, and maybe you weren't here at the top of the hour, I will also be on Steve Keen's podcast or live stream, Steve Keen and Friends, on Saturday at noon my time.
Brush up on your ecological economics there, buddy.
Hopefully we don't get into ecological economics, because I mean it would just be Steve explaining everything to me and me saying, that sounds about right. I don't know. That's hopefully we can talk about interest. Actually, this is one thing I would like to bring up, Ty, if you're still listening. This is one thing I would like to bring up. I understand. I would just like to talk from kind of that per the heterodox, Steve's perspective, how he thinks interest rates work. That would be interesting. Something worthwhile to discuss. But yeah, I'm excited to talk to Steve. And again, between both, and I'm sure a lot of us follow the same path, but I first listened to Warren Mosler's debate, I think, and then I know at that time as well. I had speaking of the devil, I had a Marxist friend say, "Hey, there's this crazy Australian bird that that does all this stuff with cycles and whatnot. You might be interested in him." And I'll tell you what, that's when. And actually, I think going back, because I think that this friend of mine had been trying to get me to understand some of the sequence stuff for government spending. I think he handed me a Steve Keen article. Maybe all the way back in 2014-ish, regarding when Steve would do pieces for Forbes, So I probably read it and said, I don't understand what the hell this guy's saying. He's got it all backwards. And obviously I was a little prideful, a little wrong, but it really was some of those videos that he did, I want to say around 2014, 2013, like when he started out with that QED program as opposed to his Minsky program. Those lectures that he had right around that time frame when he was starting to develop Minsky and switching from that QED program to Minsky, that were just, everything that helped so much click at the time. And hopefully it's still in Steve's memory, because I'd like to pick his brain on some of those ideas as well on
Nice.
Saturday. Because that's some of the stuff too that I immediately could connect. Steve's work. He's on the stream right now. You could ask him. Yeah. I do have, unfortunately I will have a bit of a hard stop, I believe. So I don't know what time is noon your time. Are you still
New Zealand, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, so it's noon Eastern time, is it?
For me. So that'd be 1. We're both going to bring up
6 a.m. for me.
6.
Ooh. Oh yeah.
7.
So 6 a.m. I'm almost just starting to go to sleep.
He's going to get to bed.
So yeah, I work for overseas volunteer work, kind of paid, but so it's all off my time, circadian rhythm time. So I'm often just starting to finish my bedtime reading around 3 a.m. So I could stay up for that for sure. If you want to send me the link, Ty, I could maybe come and join you. But don't count on it. Douglas is the go-to man here, so I'd be interested. Hopefully, I'll get up to it. Just what day is that again?
This Saturday. So that would be your Sunday morning at
my
7.
Sunday.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I might be able to do that. Just send me the link and.
Applied MMT podcast. I think there are some disagreements. I don't know with MMT that.
My take is there's no disagreement. It's talking past each other.
I think so. I think it's that we talked a couple weeks ago about the framing. If you tilt the Y and the X-axis, the actual data remains identical, but you just
Mark Lavoie, post-Keynesian, who was all on the central bank's independent, right? As far as their mandate goes, for sure, it's like orthogonal to the Treasury or the Parliament. But they're still all the same. And I remember Warren mentioning that Mark had backed away from that. Right, he realised it was a bit of a faceplant. So I think when you've got really good post-Keynesians, they're so close to MMT, right? That there's almost no difference. There's some subtle differences, but you can reconcile them if you want to. So you've got to want to reconcile and build bridges with people, not just be a contrarian and say, the MMT's all wrong. The troll that I do is MMT is a superset of post-Keynesian economics, which includes institutional, Veblen. Randy Ray is big on Torsten Veblen and the leisure class and all that sort of carry on. So if you incorporate all of that, MMT is much broader, expansive thing because it's starting with government as a currency monopolist and going from there. But there is a narrow MMT like that Stephanie Kelton does, right, and that others do that only focuses on the monetary operations, and that's very narrow, and it's okay. It's okay for what it does. It would regard itself as a subset of post-Keynesianism and almost an institutionalism. But what the post-Keynesian often say, where Warren has it's not a disagreement, right? It's not a disagreement. Warren is just quite consistently pointing out that they're on a fixed exchange rate mentality It's not just the paradigm. I mean, Steve King could model a floating exchange rate if he wanted to. Probably does. But other post Keynesian that don't have Minsky, or they're just talking out their assholes, they're like, they have a mentality. Like Mark Blythe is one, maybe even Michael Hudson. They have a mentality that is fixed exchange rate because that's what they learned. And they're telling stories about fixed exchange rate constraints, which don't exist if you have floating exchange rate.
The debate.
Any names that I mention on this podcast are entirely fictional, and no one has been harmed in the making of this podcast.
Yeah, I brought up. Hopefully, you guys can see this, and you can see that I was listening to some Chumbawamba earlier, since it's being recommended in the screen. But this was a QED program that was right here. For those of you asking, I do think that. I think Steve Keen would put an emphasis on getting domestic production at kind of full capacity. And it's important to him. And so when someone like Warren Mosler would say, and not that Warren Mosler is MMT, and as Bijou was just saying, you can have a broad.
Bill Mitchell would say
narrow.
the same as Warren. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying, at least in terms of the historical disagreement between Steve and Warren, I think there was. I think that's really where it rested upon is the disagreement between, because I think you could understand Warren as saying. I'm not saying this is what he is saying, but I think you could understand him as saying something to the effect of, if people are willing to give you their stuff for pieces of paper,
BMWs, piece of paper. What's the problem?
Yeah, you should take that agreement for as long as they're willing to do it.
Don't kill the goose that lays the golden egg.
Yes.
And if they're going to come in and buy your politicians and buy your land and buy all your industry, why are you letting them do that? Okay, so Steve King comes back and says, well, the governments are stupid. He doesn't trust the governments to do that. And Warren's saying, okay, right.
Yeah.
They're sort of talking past each other at that point. What Warren's saying, well, yeah, but I'm just giving the MMT base case, which is a sensible government that is using MMT as you might in a base case analysis. So it's like Warren is a counterfactual arguer, right? He's arguing the counterfactual. What if the governments was kind of semi-sensible, or even not even totally wise, just understood the policy space they've got available? What decisions would they make?
Yep.
Would they sell domestic? Would they deindustrialize and sell critical, supply infrastructure and outsource it to foreigners? Of course not. They would fully employ the domestic population. And Steve's going, yeah, but the governments are stupid. They don't do that.
Yeah.
And it's like that's where you get this crossfire talking past each other.
Yeah. Which is why I can confidently say I agree with both.
Same here. The power dynamics are so important, right?
Yeah.
In our reality today, you can't ignore them.
Yeah.
And Warren's fighting this battle like Don Quixote. Well, not like Don Quixote. He's much more intelligent. He's just trying to educate people that, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to live under these constraints. We can have domestic production and have decent imports, right? And try to optimize our terms of trade, real terms of trade.
Ty, with our team, on the same team, I'm going to be diplomatic. It's just in my nature. If you're not on my team, then it's fair game. But if you're same team, I will.
Whatever the neural network says.
Yeah. This is QED. This is some of the stuff that really got me started, man. And actually, someone put it up here. Where was it at? So someone talked about, QED video from 2016. I'll highlight it so everyone can see it in 13 minutes. They said, here he is, the man who moved economics from a pseudoscience to a reasonable science. Yeah, I think that's why I got so attached to both what Warren and Steve were saying, is they were both saying things in a framework that felt so scientific. And not that I'm in the sciences, but it just, everything they were saying, you could go test. I think that was what was most important. There was nothing that I could go, I couldn't test anything that the Austrians were saying, right? When I was an Austrian, there was no test I could go run. There's no data that I could go gather and make a prediction off of. None of that existed. Everything that Steve Keen and everything that Warren Mosler said could be tested. And that's why it was so fun. I mean, it was fun to get into because you could go gather the data. That's why all the skills I have with Fred and everything. I mean, there's not a data set on Fred that I haven't looked at and put in percent change to see what does it look like. Does it look like anything? I mean, all this sort of stuff. You can't do that in other frameworks. It doesn't say
it.
Yeah.
Once you understand the nitty gritty reality of the real world, so in other words, go out, get a job, buy stuff. You understand the whole equilibrium analysis nonsense. It's just, the mind has got to reject that.
Yeah.
Just take a look at the real world. Any system in the real world that has a similitude to economic systems, like in nature, there's no equilibrium there. So you just reject neoclassical as a nice fairy story for mathematicians. It's a sort of a abstract branch of mathematics, not even that interesting really, and you sort of reject that. And if you actually, so you got to be careful with people like Thomas there calling Steve Keen an economist. That's a bit of an insult.
Oh yeah, it's like what would happen? What would happen if Steve Keen ever won the Nobel Prize in economics? What would happen?
Yeah. But he has to do a Grigori Perelman and reject it, right? Give it back. Say, I don't want your stinking prize. That's what happened to the guy who won the millennial prize, $1 million prize for solving the Poincaré conjecture. Why can't I ever say that? It always comes out in my head fine. Poincaré. It's better with a hard K. Yeah. You hear about that?
No,
the Russian guy solved the Poincaré conjecture. Is one of the prizes they released at the beginning of the millennium that had $1 million prize on its solution. It's quite an interesting set of prizes. Like one of them, the Riemann conjecture. If you disprove it, you don't get the prize. Because the real mathematics, you see, is involved in proving that Riemann hypothesis. And if you can disprove it just by choosing any prime number that's not on the on Riemann's line in the complex plane, whatever, real particle, half or something. So it's easy to prove it just by finding a very large prime number that no one's seen before that is a counterexample. So there's no math there, it's just like computer search. But if you did a theoretical proof, they still wouldn't give you the prize. Just proof. Anyway, this Russian guy.
That was going right over my head, man.
Oh, sorry. Anyway, the point of the story is that the Russian guy won the prize for this really interesting topology problem and rejected.
Yeah. Hold on. He didn't take the $1 million?
Didn't take the $1 million, went back to live with his mum in Moscow, wherever, just eating, bread. And
why did he reject the prize?
Okay. He's an interesting character.
Okay.
He doesn't like the monetary incentives. So he did it purely for the thought. He just didn't want that whole recognition that he thought that it was not his prize for a start. He was just building on a whole lot of previous work.
Okay.
People have done a whole lot of work on Riemann flows and things.
Oh,
and he thought
okay.
He was very sort of, anarchist type.
I get what you're saying. Okay. Yeah, he didn't think it was all his. Yeah. That's an interesting sentiment to have.
Yeah, very interesting.
That's very interesting.
Very, very rare type of. There's a certain purity of thought though that I appreciate in the guy. The way he grew up doing mathematics in Russia is rigorous, man. They are amazing over there.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about the failures in Russian mathematics come over the Wall Street and make $1 million as year salaries as quants. Those are the failures. The really good mathematicians are so into it that they don't don't care about the monetary reward. The
Yeah.
thinking is its own reward. Yeah,
That's how I like to think about it too. Real quick in the chat here. One wonders why the Fred collects so much data, and yet they're unable to process it correctly, and that I can have content for my stream. Yeah, I gotta tell you, I think when Warren Mosler was on the other day and he said that the staffers and the interns, that they all get it, right? I mean, they've seen this play out enough and they kind of get it. I do think there's people that have to be looking at this data and say, yeah, it can't be right. The other thing I would say too is, and I wish the Fred would do this. I mean, we capture all this data, and you've got to imagine they have access to supercomputers galore that they could hook up, and it can't be that hard to start running some correlation analysis on all these data sets. And you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, start testing some of your theories out in the data. You have almost a century worth of data now on so many different, I mean, the stuff we've collected, the data series we've collected from, the 40s forward, post World War II forward, they're so numerous. So it makes me believe they could get together some efforts. Speaking of efforts too, if you are an academic, any academics, if you run across this stream and there are any students that want to put some effort into some of the stuff that Bijou and I have kicked off, send them my way, and have them hit me up in the Twitter DMs or something like that. Without hesitation, Bijou and I will get them set up in the right direction to piece some of these projects together. Especially too, if I've a few kind of academics that followed me as of late, and I don't exactly know what their interaction is with various students and how it all looks and plays out. But if you happen to be watching and there are students out there, the Python stuff is not that hard. The deep learning stuff is not that hard. That can be learned in a couple weeks. The tough part is willing to take the time to pull every data series and validate it and run it through and do the rigorous hard work, which I just don't have the time. Really, to be honest, I don't really have I'm too old now. I don't have the desire to do. But if you're 21 and you do have the time and the desire, reach out. We will get you going, and it would absolutely thrill me to see some of this work. People run with some of this work and do exactly that. Run through these data series that the Fred makes available, and start to piece together some ideas that can. That can be used for the new generation of economists that should be looking at this in a whole different way. Throw away the epicycle maps and just don't even spend. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't know how like the Levy Institute does it. I don't know how any of these professors do it with their students. But to me, any time spent on learning anything neoclassical is a complete waste of time. Just build it from a ground up and stop fighting the fight against. In my opinion, stop fighting the fight against them and start just. Doing the research the way you think is the right way to do it.
I know academics do have a squeeze. They generally have high teaching loads these days, unless they're like tenured or something. But it's always, if they've got grad students.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Great grad students. Yeah.
So eventually something like that'll happen, I'm sure.
I really think the idea that we're working with here to kind of use deep learning in the opposite direction, right? Like, see if there's anything in the data as opposed to, just trying to shove data to make some prediction. Not to care if the prediction's right or wrong per se, but just see if these models can learn anything. I think that's an exciting way to use deep learning going forward, to use some of these deep learning, styles of models going forward. I think that is there's some promise.
Certainly,
there.
It's a wide open space, wide open territory to explore there. Like I was just saying to Douglas earlier, it's like I haven't even really gotten around to doing a lot of the uncertainty analysis. So there's all sorts of factors to consider when you're doing these forecasts, such as the skewness in the data in the forecast. You could have a you could have a 90% confidence that a price movement will go up, and like 10% that it'll go down, but the payoff to go up might be like 1 unit of whatever, and the penalty if it goes down, it might like be 100. So what's your actual risk exposure there? You want to bet on it on the 10% going down if you're going to make a bet in that case. And so there's all those layers that can be researched, and it's wide open field of research, I reckon.
It's exciting. I mean, I'm excited to keep pressing in. We were the other thing. So our ultimate goal is to start getting essentially in the deep learning world, they call them pipelines, just essentially data series in a handful of ways that you can kind of chop them up and look at them, right? You get these data pipelines pieced together, and you create this. I call it the Cindy Crawford, the supermodel, and you create various predictions, right? I mean, you create all these different predictions, and then the idea is to eventually feed them into a learning model that is, what the hell is the name? What are they called? What are the learning models? Oh gosh. That actually do like the video game style training. Reinforcement learning. You finally get it into a reinforcement learning style model, right? When it's all said and done, right? So a reinforcement learning model is a deep learning style model that would just, you could teach it to play a video game. You could teach it to drive a car, right? It crashes the car, and then eventually it learns, to dodge the obstacles, right?
It's got a limited set of control knobs. So
it can go, forward, backwards, left, right, sort of thing. Jump if you're playing a game. So the joke that we were having is, so we finally get all these data pipelines into this model that have all these predictions of various ways of kind of guessing where markets might go, and the reinforcement learning model finally decides that the best bet is just not to take a bet, or to just constantly lose money, because eventually when it does make money, the payout is so astronomical that losing money the entire
MMT
time
proves to live.
That losing money the entire time was finally was actually the right decision. And I figured that would be quite poetic if that's how it ended up.
Totally. I wouldn't mind.
I would mind. I don't know. No, I actually do think that I'm right and Nassim Taleb is wrong. And the reason I think that, I'm not saying that there's not uncertainty, and that chaos can't happen and all that sort of stuff. But I think particularly asset markets, the price of an asset is far more controlled by governments than people realize. And I'm not saying saying like a conspiracy sort of control. I'm saying that it's a market prices.
Institutional.
Market prices are really a policy decision along the way. So I'm kind of convinced that that the idea that Nassim Taleb has, that you'll lose a little because eventually the payoff will be big enough.
He's a skeptic, right? So a lot of his takes are that don't rely on economic modeling and theory because it hasn't worked in the past, and a lot of that was not entirely neoclassical, but a lot of that is because they're not using a proper, accurate framework for analysis. And I don't know if he understands MMT. Like I said before, he has said some MMT-ish things. So, but I'm not sure he actually has put in the time to understand what MMT is all about or on about. He probably has a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to it because he's just almost congenitally now predisposed to like just thinking economists and journalists are just all frauds.
Yeah.
Because for the most part they are.
They are. Yeah.
His takes on journalism are hilarious. It's like it's mostly noise. So, and he's all about, and he's not wrong, right? He's correct in a lot of his analysis that a lot of it's got to be getting rid of the noise so you can see the signal. And he uses Monte Carlo for a lot of it. But I think recently he's probably looked at neural networks, and in a way neural networks are doing a kind of a similar thing in a different sort of way. At least when you train a neural network, it's pretty much like Monte Carlo. Not the same, but the sort of flavor of going through all sorts of combinatorial possibilities. And so doing more empirical. It's more empirical than theoretical. There's a bit of theory involved in selecting, like what we're doing, selecting inputs and having a mental model of how the system would work, which could give you an advantage if you're doing a simulation. And I just think I don't think he's wrong about what he says. He's just, his skepticism is well placed, I think.
Yeah.
But he's looking at old paradigms which were wrong, and so obviously it's from his point of view, economics doesn't have much use for him, for a trader. He's probably right about that. Old mainstream economics isn't much use for these traders. They can get it right in the good times, but it will blow up on them later.
Daniel had a question that I want to touch on real quick. He said, "Can the model be applied to commodities too?" Eventually, I hope so. I'm a little skeptical that you can, at least using MMT heterodox framework, predict commodities.
Meso economics. Yeah.
Good way to put it. Yeah, I think the meso analysis of we're attempting, I don't think will be directly applicable to economics or to economics shit.
we don't have the resources to do that. So you'd have to be looking at terabytes of data.
It's getting late. It is directly applicable to economics. I don't know if it's directly applicable to commodities. Because I think there's so much that goes into commodities and and pricing commodities that I envision you could, but it would just it would be very one of the things I will have to do. I absolutely will have to do is I will have to figure out eventually some sort of model to understand oil, because of how important oil is. I have a model. I have this comparative inventory model that works out really well, and it's certainly going to have to be a pipeline that gets pumped in, because obviously the price of oil is the price of everything else, I should say, is to some extent the price of oil. So that needs to be figured out, and will definitely be added in. And actually, my base model that I use right now, I divide the physical flows out by oil. That's my inflationary adjuster, if you will, is oil itself. So the more information we can predict about oil is important. But one of the things you'll notice with commodities in general is they take a very chaotic. Their price is very chaotic, and what I mean by that is, let's see, give me some time here.
Speculated on wildly.
Which okay. So here's the thing, right? You're right. I agree. So are stocks, though, right?
Absolutely. That's why they also fractal price.
But oh man, why did that pop up like this?
But for real resource, there's got to be some underlying price dynamic there that it's shifting around, but there's a quasi-equilibrium because the market is trying to clear. And so, but when you've got a monopolist, it's a lot trickier. You need a lot more data to, paradoxically, I think, understand monopoly behavior and commodity prices, or the effect of monopoly behavior on commodity prices, because often it's just a decision that they make. We're going to raise the price now. Why? Oh, well, because the USA are being dicks about things, whatever reason.
I'm looking up. the federal
That's
debt.
very fractal.
So here's kind of what I want to show you. This isn't gonna. If I had more time, I could possibly piece this together a little bit better.
Take your time.
But give me 1 second here. What I want to point out is, one of my one of my theories. Actually, I tweeted this a while ago. I just go find my own tweet. But I do think what we see is the stock market, the long term trend of this is because of government spending. Actually, one of the things I did is I divided out the total market cap of the NYSE by the national debt, right? And you end up getting this cycle where the residual of that cycle overlays really closely with the private debt cycle. I mean, it was eerie how close it overlaid with the private debt cycle. My point being is the trend, and I'm thinking like in seasonal trend decomposition models, right? The trend of that is government spending. You would then maybe say the seasonality is the credit cycle, and then the residual is the gamblers, right?
Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah.
So if you're tracking, Daniel, my point to that would be, let me see if I can overlay. Let me see. I think I can do.
Yeah, if you want to do day trading, like, go in and out, you're going to have to deal with all that noise from all the other algorithms and traders that are doing day trading. So if you want to be a conservative investor, which I think is the better approach, so you don't ever blow up. You want to be a conservative investor, you got to look at more fundamentals and long-term trends, which are driven by the government deficit spending. But it's not like the government has an active role in that. They almost can't help it. They're going to have to be supporting increased productivity. If firms want to be productive, they're going to use credit if they can't get sales. But why would they do that? Because they know in future they can make sales. And what supports the ability of people in debt to repay once they, it's either they're going to just, adjust their payments, or they're going to go bankrupt, or whatever, or the government is going to have to eventually increase the deficit involuntarily, like non-discretionary. They're going to have to once the job cycle, goes down. So one way or another, the government supports the rise in productivity through a rise in the prices and so forth. And so all that short-term fluctuation from the gambling and speculation is something, you have to deal with if you're a day trader. But if you're just in it for long-term investments, you can, kind of factor that out.
Yeah. So I have pulled up the government debt laid on top of the S&P 500. Amazingly, they are both up 6,000% since 1975. I mean, almost each equally. Coincidence? I think not. Okay, but here's the thing. If you do a trend decomposition, the trend you will see come out is what the yellow line is, right? Of the S&P, right? So it's not, it's just how it works out. What I want to point out, though, is then when you pull something up, like let's just look at natural gas. Let's go to Henry Hub. Natural gas, NYMEX. There we go. I'm gonna get rid of this. It's up and down. I mean, it is it is a chart that you would expect to see that is pure chaos, right? It is a purely speculative chart. And the Tim Gooding did some really cool research on agent-based modeling, and he has actually I've got the program somewhere around here. I have it installed. Yeah, it's called NetLogo that he used. And he did this toy trader model. It was really cool. I mean, he set up just a handful of simple rules, and you could get this price chart of the toys that they were trading. And the price chart looks like a stock chart, but it looks like when there's no money supply increase over time, it looks like the chart that's on the screen right now for natural gas, right? It looks like a chart of oil. it doesn't look like a chart of the stock market, even though there are still fluctuations if you zoom in, telescope in at any given time. But if you go wide enough, there's a long-term trend that emerges. So that's why the analysis we're doing and the assumptions that we have really can't be applied to commodities. Because I think the real residual, so if the trend of the stock market is government spending, there is no, that trend just doesn't exist in commodities. And the residual would be the gambling of traders, and then the seasonality would be the supply of the underlying commodity. So that's how that's kind of how I would look at it, and why I think it's particularly difficult to deal with commodities, because there's no trend, and then from that perspective too, there's no edge, right? There's nothing that I could learn about oil markets that anyone else, right? I mean, I would have to go into the oil field. I mean, I have to be a geologist, right? Or whatever, natural gas. So, Daniel, I hope that helps.
Sounds right. Yeah, that's a good summary. Yeah. MMT is a very macro economics framework, and it's decreasing applicability to mesoeconomics and microeconomics. Once you get down to where it's all more relative price stories.
Keep talking, because I'm doing.
Man, I'm in trouble, dude. My daughter is like slamming doors on me.
We can't, just
telling me to shut up.
We can't hear anything.
She's the sensitive one with the musical ears. Doesn't like the sound of my voice.
Doesn't she know we have thousands of people watching?
Yeah, I told her, but she's this is her study time. I think she's probably listening to a lecture. She likes to focus, but so I didn't have much more to say on the commodities, to be honest. My next thing would go to collectivism and stuff like that. Other things that I've been looking at. But maybe I can put that in the chat here. So I was, this is part of the whole kind of little mini odyssey that went on last week.
Hold on 1 second before we get there. Listen,
okay.
I put it up on the screen. Man. I put it. This is gonna hopefully this is gonna hopefully tickle Ty Keen's. I don't know. That's going places I don't want to go. Sorry. Tickle his fancy. I think that's what I wanted to say. Here is. Okay.
If you run your finger across that graph or your buttocks, you'll definitely get some sort of tickle.
Yeah. It's that good. It's that good. Blue line is the Wilshire 5000 total market cap divided by the public debt, right? The red line is private debt to GDP. No, the red line is just total credit to the non-financial sector. Okay. Each rate of change, and my interocular test says they correlate. Which the reason this matters is not so much as a predictive element, but it just goes to show that the derivative, the residual, the seasonal trend, the seasonal component to the trend is the private debt cycle. Right. So when I take out the government spending, all that's left over is the private debt cycle driving stock prices, right? And I don't know. Good. I think it confirms everything that anyone in our circles would already agree with. But I'm glad to see that it shows up in the data, and I'm sure right now that Henrik and my real econ macro guy are going to have some screenshots to tell me otherwise. But probably
a screenshot. Wrong.
This is all wrong. So
anti-correlated when you look at it.
Yeah.
All you can do is be honest, do your best. So yeah.
Derek, what do you welcome to the chat. I think it's the first time I've seen you jump in the chat. What do you mean you're skeptical of how to interpret the patterns? Curious to know. Curious to know what you mean by that. But welcome aboard, man. Thanks for saying hi.
Yeah. Thanks, Derek.
Um,
Yeah, well, you can see moments of anti-correlation and all that. So this is it looks like okay. So economic data can be misleading, econometric data, because you can get a lot of data with these time series. So it's not like doing a social science survey, but still the quality of the data is still very much like in the social sciences. So
yeah,
where
yeah,
where are the real uncertainties? What else is at play? So what happens with the Twitter debates is you get these guys like Douglas and Henrik and Real Macroecon, and they put up a chart with like 2 time series, and that's it. And it's
yeah,
always just like,
yeah,
you're wrong.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
right. No, you're
yeah,
wrong.
yeah, yeah.
It is. It's good fun, and you can do it honestly, and you can do it dishonestly, and you can always use the statistics to tell a lie. So it's like, who's really being honest? Well, it's not. It's hard to say. Maybe they pull up some charts and they're telling a story that looks consistent, but then there's all the other data that you're ignoring. It's just such a huge thing to really get everything straight. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's more complicated than the weather. The weather is a kind of a system where you can dimensionally reduce it down to a few variables like pressure, temperature, the velocities, momentum, and the humidity and whatever. But the economic system has all these freaking human created things that go into it, and a whole lot of agents. We're not all homogeneous
Yeah,
agents, and
yeah.
so yeah, I'd say Derek's healthy amount of skepticism is warranted for
Yeah.
sure.
Let
But
me
you're only Douglas isn't proving anything here. He's
correct.
just giving you a
Yes.
story, and it's like,
Correct.
here's the data that may be useful to tell the story, but it's not like Karl Popper falsification type stuff. It's just
Let me back up and let me restate in very clear terms. All I'm trying to say with this is that the seasonal component of the change. Let me even back up further. This is how I run across charts like these, right? I think to myself, hey, I need to do a seasonal decomposition of whatever, right? I mean, I just need to see, right? I just need to see something.
Yeah.
And then I think to myself, okay, does this look like a data series that I've seen before? One of the, what I call the big data series, right?
Yeah.
And is there any reason to believe that there should be some overlap, right? Or something like that, to that extent, right? And not that it necessarily, not that I would say that this, proof. I mean, I might tweet out that this is proof of MMT, right? But it's just for Twitter. But the point is, I think the way that I look at this is really kind of been more of a like I mean, you've even said that Bijou, you've told me I kind of operate like a Faraday, right? Where I'm just constantly testing things out, right?
Yeah. You're a good.
My expectation is that this should exist the way that it does because of what the framework would be, right? But the entire heterodox framework. I wouldn't claim too much with this, but to me, it makes sense that the the seasonal component, the trend component is government spending. The seasonal component is the credit cycle, and then the residual is the gambling, right?
Yeah.
And then the point of that, then the next step is not to just say, hey, I've got it. The next step is to say, okay, now we're going to dig deeper. And Derek, as you said, I mean, the claim is big, so we need to go even further to validate or invalidate that claim. And so the next step would be to do the first steps of machine learning, to run it through all the different metrics tests, mutual information, correlation, Granger causation, right? I mean, if we think there's forecastability between one and the other, right?
Right.
And then if that still aligns and we're still good there, then the next test is, okay, now we can stick it in a learning model, a deep learning model. And are we going to be fair in that test to make sure that the deep learning model has been, rigorously shaken of any overfitting, or right? Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, do we have the data prepped in a way that we're going to get an honest shake out of it? So that's the process. Obviously, I'm convinced that this is what it is, enough to go take the hours to piece it all together. And I would also imagine if you're not convinced, you're not going to take the time to piece it together. But that's the process. So I hope you don't think I'm saying too much here, more than I am. But I also think it's not, I don't think this is coincidental. One of the questions that came up was what happened in the 1980s. One of the things that hadn't happened by the 1980s and really kicked off starting in the 1990s is the private debt to GDP load just wasn't that big. So the higher the private debt to GDP load gets, the more sensitive asset prices are going to be to that underlying cycle. So, I think that would give kind of the explanation as to why there's
more fragile.
The credit, the private debt, the credit itself, not adjusted by GDP, had such a big spike, but that didn't fully kick into the markets at that point as a percent of change.
Yeah, the whole era where credit cards, credit, margin debt, and all that became more useful is really a change of era, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
So when you look back over all history, I think you have to be prepared to maybe look at those changes in paradigm, or changes in the institutions, banking structures, and so forth. Yeah. So sounds good. I think that story is right. Also, it's a long way from MMT recognizing government as the source of the price level and unemployment, to even something fairly macro like the S&P 500, which is mesoeconomics. You can't. It's not a very easy task to go from the source of the price level to a particular price, even if it's an index. But I think Douglas has made the case very well that over time, we're looking at prices which are numerators. Right, they're valuing something else, but where is the source of the absolute price level? It's got to be from the monopoly issue of the currency. So, if you don't have a good mechanistic model for that, which you probably aren't unless you have pretty amazing resources and compute power and so forth, you're going to probably have to discover such models using huge, like Cindy or whatever you've got available.
Yeah.
But until you're at that level, it's going to have to be something a little bit looser, like a neural network, to do the analysis. At least for us, we don't have the budget of a NIST laboratory or the NOAA weather forecasting people.
Yet.
Nor should we. It'd be waste of resources, wouldn't it?
To each their own, my man. I'm kidding. You're trying to say finance is wasted resources?
Yeah. All this carry on, all this rentier income activity should be putting it into forecasting crop yields and weather, the real economy.
When you say things like that, my conscience clicks in. Okay.
You should at least be putting some of this into education,
which we do.
Well, that's all our. Yeah. That's all our Wednesdays, mostly education.
Yeah. To be fair,
want us to do some research? We'll have to start doing some surveys of our audience here.
Actually, survey.
Survey time.
Survey says, if there's anything, I'm trying to think of. Okay, the next model I'm already working on is one, just so to get the hype train going. The Kelton class, the model that we made that I posted on God, Ty, here's the thing, man. I finally get focused on the next thing I'm going to say, and then you have to throw just a banger line out there, and I just need to turn off the chat sometimes. I don't even know what I was going to say. Survey. What is it that I'm going to do next?
Yeah.
Let me set up the frame here. Let me frame this here. Already seeing really good results, promising results, even on our base model that I shared earlier this week on Twitter for on stock data. There's learning taking place. The threshold is, can I trust it more than the Bayes model, which has been working quite well. So one of the things I like to do is, so if I'm working on something that I'll post to Twitter for kind of academic research, I'm also testing this on stocks at the same time, right? So the next, I want my next project. And so I'm building up a better model. And I found a kind of a neat research paper that's given me a few different ideas, some things to try out. If you're in the deep learning world, one idea is to start and use kind of the feature and essentially allow the deep neural network to be your feature engineer process, use a convolutional layer, use a convolutional model that then feeds in to the LSTM model to then get your prediction. And this is kind of that pipeline idea that I want to go into. So that's my next model that I want to build, but I also want to do something that kind of gives back, if you will. What should I target it on? I think one idea might be CPI, and I think what would be kind of cool about CPI is that would force me to get into some new data series as well, particularly like supply side data series, which is something I've wanted to pull. But if there's anything else that pops up in your mind, let me know if there's a maybe a cooler project that I could work on and it would be a forecasting prediction style model, but that would need a slightly different look in terms of the data. But if there's anything you guys can think of beyond CPI or beyond inflation, that would be kind of
it needs to be macro.
Macro
Macro
as well.
variable.
Macro as well.
Maybe one of the currency ratios. I don't know.
Yeah, that would be fun too.
Although that would entail probably the same data for both currencies. Maybe, I don't know. It'd be a bit asymmetric if you use just the US Treasury data to do a US dollar to euro ratio learning models. That would maybe be a bit too tricky.
The other thing too with currency data is I'm not entirely sure. I'm positive I know what drives. I'm positive I know what drives stocks, right? I'm positive I know what drives. Well, I am positive. I say that a little tongue in cheek. I am positive that I know what drives interest rates. At least that one's easy. There's a monopoly price setter. But I'm not entirely sure of the whole picture of foreign exchange at this point. I don't have quite the confidence.
You'd have to pull in the trade data.
Yeah, you probably would.
But since the trade data for the USA it is with respect to all of the other nations, it might be a possible thing to do. But yeah, I mean, I just suggest it because it's a macro variable.
Actually, now that you spell it
I do
out,
appreciate
that would be actually maybe a more fun endeavor, because I have a feeling that the trade data doesn't really drive currencies that much when it's all said and done. I don't know.
That's why. Yeah, that's partly why I mentioned it. Yeah. Because the naive model would be that it's trade based. Pricing, but then you got speculation, so it has to be also currency flow, fiscal flows as well, or bank account flows. So where do you get that data from, and so forth? But anyway, just sort of throw that out there.
Ooh, that's tempting. That might be
because John T. Harvey's done the deterministic types of modeling for currencies, and you come up with really no one knows. It's speculators dominating. And so it does seem like an area where I think a neural network type of methodology might have some learning, might find some learning. I don't know.
Look at the lead times for production inputs for real capital. I have been doing a little work with relating to inflation. You might find out some interesting things. Ty, I don't know if I fully grasp that first sentence. Bijou, can you give me your take on? Look at the
a firm needs capital to buy machinery, hire labor, so forth. So those are inputs, and you don't get the actual outputs and sales until later. And so he's looking at a different data set we're looking at the fiscal flows, treasury.
Yeah, I guess what's the
HA tables, and Ty would be looking at
production inputs.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll have to think that one.
So you need to get the capital to boost production, and then
okay.
the
Okay, it clicked.
the
I'm
output
sorry.
comes, a few months later.
It clicked. Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes, yes,
yeah.
yes. Okay. Okay. At least fine. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Mm.
Okay. Yeah.
But they're using
Thanks.
different
Yep.
data set to what Douglas has got at the moment.
No, that makes
So,
sense. That makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that, Ty. I think inflation might be it. That'll also track on Twitter. I mean, hey, I got to keep growing the Twitter account. Get that MMT message out there. We are now in the third hour. If you are new here to the live stream, we let it go off the rails a little bit on the third hour and kind of talk about whatever it is that we want. So, Bijou, I'm going to switch over to your tablet if that's good. Is that okay? I know you had
Oh,
some...
sure. Okay. I got a bit of a audio constraint on my volume here, but I'll try to say something useful. What have you got? It's going to be a delay before I can see it on the YouTube.
Yeah, I just pulled up the...
Alrighty. What have I got there? Austrian Marxist.
Collectivism.
Yeah. Okay, that maybe goes with the first bit there on building MMT muscle. So, I mean, every week Douglas and I try to do sort of educative angles on everything if we can. Part of that is if you engage in people who have a different point of view, it does build up your muscles. And that's kind of why I bothered, even doing any tweets or anything, is to kind of stretch the brain a bit, do some exercise, try to get the MMT story straight, but with some honesty. So you're building real muscles, not sort of inflatable muscles. But at some stage, maybe I want to do a write-up on that, how to build MMT muscle. So one of the things that you get a lot of MMT activists struggling with is telling a coherent story. I mean, they've got it sort of straight. They've maybe learned a lot of MMT, but they can easily get stumped by microeconomic type questions which MMT doesn't answer. And so it's always good to have a kind of an understanding of what MMT can answer and what you can't with the framework. But all the nuances are really important too. So I think, so what I initially thought when I came across MMT is it's actually quite complicated, but at the beginning it can be a very simple story. So the basic MMT money story, the price story, the bond story, banking story, you can actually lay that out in like almost a one-pager, like Warren does. But understanding all the consequences that flow from that can get, quickly into some weeds. And so there's always more learning. There's always ways of framing your arguments, getting your language right. And here's the thing. Building your MMT muscle is really important for this reason, is that you're going to tell a slightly different story, still an honest story, but it nevertheless slightly different story depending on your audience. And how do you learn to speak to different people with different backgrounds, but still tell an honest story to try and help raise their awareness and understanding? One way is to sort of just mentally do it like as a mental exercise inside your head, like have a dialogue with yourself. But there's also no substitute for actually going out in the real world and trying to sort of engage with people. So that's the story of the MMT muscle just for now, just a real quick thing, not like I'm an expert on it or anything. But what it led to was, I don't know how I got onto this, but just came across these articles on collectivism. And it sort of just something I sort of had to read. Does internet activism, clicking on things, making a donation and then forgetting things. There's all sorts of behavior that you can do now online. Give yourself a pat on the back for like contributing, like, liking tweets, going on to chats hours or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, my activist job is done for the day.
Yep.
Or small dollar donations to like a campaign, like, I don't know, a Bernie Sanders campaign or something like that. And so it's not like it is useless. It actually, every little bit helps, because it's a bit of a reverse composition fallacy to think that small activist efforts don't count. They can aggregate and add up, but there's also a question that I don't think anyone really fully understands. Basically, probably because there's not a lot of research on it. But what really is, what really counts as activism? What's enduring? What lasts a long time? What actually makes real change? And I think these articles were just suggesting that the collectivist, the internet activists maybe aren't as effective as they think they are, but it is an interesting question nonetheless as to what effect a large number of people doing small things can actually have. And some of the negative, well, not negative, but some of the problems associated with that is that it can be counterproductive because you get people getting slack, right? So social loafing is an interesting concept here, and diffusion of responsibility. So it's like when you're in a big crowd and there's a few people that get really energetic, you tend to, well, some people will tend to just sort of pull back and not contribute to the whole effort. So there's that effect that can be apparent, and that can happen in any organization, not just with online activity. But so you join a big enough group and you get the feeling there's some energy, and then suddenly it dies off. Why is that? And it's because you can get this false impression that you're having a really good effect, and you may have a good effect, but you only need a few key people to drop off for the whole thing to sort of, collapse. The other interesting thing was, so sometimes the whole aggregated sort of crowdsourced model will work, like in Wikipedia, but you've got to be aware of sometimes where it doesn't work. So, I think a lot of our Twitter effort, it's hard for me to judge. Is it good effort? Are we just reaching a lot of people, or just a few annoying trolls? Something to think about, right? It's easy to sort of with Twitter. There are other accounts that people that do Hollywood entertainment, that sort of stuff, that get just huge numbers of followers compared to MMTers, and it's like, when you actually bother to think about it, it's a bit depressing. So it's like, what do you do about that? Something to think about. Just want to challenge everyone with, how does an introvert like myself, get off Twitter and out in the real world, talking to real people and making a real difference.
Wait, hold on. Are you trying to say Twitter is not the real world? What the?
Yeah.
Oh man, this is very. I thought these people really loved me.
Thing is, it's an easy thing to do. I think it does have an effect, So it's a thing you got to weigh and judge. How much time do you have? So like our frenemy or real macroecon guy, when I had a look at his account, because I was trying to pull up a tweet that I couldn't find of his to respond to. He's just posting things to Twitter every minute. It's just insane. So is that having a real effect? I don't know. But for an introvert like myself, one thing might be later on, once you build up a body of knowledge, is to go to a school or university and see if you can, run some courses. Even after evenings classes for adult education can be something you can get into if you're a good teacher. Which has a small local effect. It's not a global effect like you have maybe on Twitter, but it might be actually, in some ways more effective. So there's all these things that I've been thinking about how to get MMT in the public consciousness, and not just in the consciousness of the elites or the professional classes, but right spread throughout society, so that even if you don't agree with the MMT policy, you at least have a better understanding of what MMT is on about, and what it means to have a government that's a monopoly issuer of the currency. And I can find myself agreeing with our frenemy Henrik on Twitter, like when he says, well, governments are not democratic, blah, blah, blah. I would just say I agree. MMT is not saying that governments are great. It's just saying that the government is the currency monopoly. And what are the consequences of that? Maybe one of the consequences is is that we should be working to have more democracy, or even just begin to have any democracy, which we probably, looking back at history, probably never had. Just have what's called democracy because you got to vote, but that's not a real democracy. Right. Sorry about rushing all that. Had to rush a little bit because I don't want to offend my daughter.
Yeah. I do think.
Any comments?
That a real path to success is through the finance channel. Not
come back to your Austrians versus Marxists.
Yeah, but
I reckon that's definitely a channel, right? I think you have to go full steam on all fronts, but it's not like every person has to do every channel. So I think with yourself, when I come on your show and do research with you, it's definitely attuned to the finance audience, and that's a totally legitimate audience to try and win over, because I mean, more knowledge, more useful knowledge is not a bad thing. It can be used for bad purposes, but like Warren keeps saying, he believes in an informed electorate rather than an ill-informed electorate, and it's just one half the equation, right? Having the knowledge.
Let me put it this way. How many people? Who is the biggest Who is the biggest MMT name right now in terms of the content they create that's engaged with by the public?
Probably Stephanie Kelton.
I would agree. 150,000 followers on Twitter, right? Yeah. Who is? Let's do top three. Stephanie Kelton. And it can even be. Yeah, I mean, it can even be heterodox, right? I mean, I think Steve Keen would probably be on that list.
Yeah.
And then
Bill Mitchell gets a lot of readers of his blog.
Yeah.
Reading a blog is like something, that's dedication. But it tends to be an insider crowd.
I'm looking up just Twitter following right now. Twitter followers. Rohan Gray has 25,000.
But you almost got to count the impact by trying to figure out how many haters they have as well.
Yeah.
And like people who are new and just trying to learn. That's the tricky one to compute.
Here's the point I'm trying to make is I'm going to look up the stalwart, who I would say, Joe Weisenthal, who I would say is...
Yeah, Joe.
Who I would say, Ty, I love you, man. That's the kids do. I would say he's MMT friendly, right?
Yeah.
And he's a finance bro, right? 335,000 followers on Twitter, right?
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is the world of people who digest economic theory, the world of people who do it via the avenue of finance is like the size of Jupiter compared to the size of Mercury for those who are getting it from the economic angle, right?
Yeah. I probably would say you're right about it.
And I guess what I'm saying is if you can convince half of academia that MMT is the right way to view things, I still don't think you win that battle, right? I mean, I think you have to do 51%, right?
Right.
You convince 25% of the finance world that MMT, heck, you convince 10% of the finance world that MMT is right. You've dwarfed the size of the 50% in academia that you changed, and I think you get a lot more impact from that, right?
That's an interesting proposition. Could you elaborate and explain why that?
Yeah, because the 10% that figured it out, money talks. They're going to start making money. They're gonna start kicking the asses of the non-MMTers, and you'll get at least a few of them to gloat. Right.
I'd have to do some gloating. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, that's so.
If they do the gloating, yeah. If they got the receipts to show for it, I think you're probably right, because burying MMT analysis in a journal, yeah, it's burying it.
And
Whereas
from the
what,
sounds of things, there are the academic types that know they're wrong. They just can't publicly admit it, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And certainly there are the finance types as well, right?
Hmm.
That are just going to stick their head in the sand and say this is the way that it is. But
Hmm.
I think there's enough of a pull to just be right for the sake of being right, where
Yeah,
you can get a change. Yeah, that's kind of my
yeah.
take on it. But then again, I mean, it's the
I
game
think
is fun to me because it's a finance game first. I
it's a
mean,
finance
yeah,
game. MMT can definitely give you a leg up in the finance game. That's for sure. Um, it's actually a little bit detrimental to MMT on the other side, on the social science angle, because people there in those kind of discourses, they seem to have some sort of weird attitude to money, like it's dirty or something. So it's got to be, like I said, it's got to be a little bit of a different angle of attack on them, and to make it more about the real economy to
yeah,
those crowds, and then you've got the in. So you got to kind of, like I said before, you got to be a bit aware of who you're talking to,
yep,
and that's where probably the name MMT is a little bit unfortunate. Should just be macroeconomics or something more generic, because it speaks to people of all stripes. Whereas if you understand it as modern money theory, it's like, yeah, you're right. I think it's like, an industrial engineer is going to be interested in physics because it's more closer to their discipline, and a playwright or a poet's not
yeah,
going to be so
yeah,
much
yep,
interested in physics because it's
yep,
not near their discipline.
yep.
But yeah. Anyway, that's all I've got for now. Just not wanting to do too much talking here. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We have Ty saying that
I've got talking constraints.
we need Stone Cold Steve Austin to change over to
Yeah,
the.
that's what Warren talked about. He's like, he hasn't seen any celebrities, any big names,
Switch on over. Yeah.
actually bother to do any serious reading and research. So if Joe Weisenthal and them are like some of the leading educators on MMT for the public audience, it's like, it's a little bit depressing, right?
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
kind of want
Yeah.
your celebrities and stars to do it, but then okay, that could be a poisoning of the well too, because they can also do crypto and weird stuff like that too. So it's like, do you want that type, or do you want it to be a little bit slower growth, like conservative slower growth of
Yeah.
MMT
Yeah.
awareness
Yeah.
is perhaps maybe not as exciting, or it's not as immediate, but it's maybe the better way to go. To say, maybe sometime people who want to get out the pitchforks will understand that MMT actually gives you intellectual pitchfork. It's an intellectual pitchfork, and so it's a non-violent means to possibly create some pretty serious system change. Like, I'm not talking just reforms. Like, because if like Teddy Bruschi in our chat just before, if you change the whole mindset and understanding of operations of the Fed and the Treasury, it's a peaceful, non-violent way of I would say it's more than a reform, because you're really flipping everything 180 degrees. So that's what I call a revolution. But it's revolution without guns, without violence. It's just an intellectual revolution. What are the guns? What are the pitchforks for that? Well, it's intellectual MMT.
Yeah.
Big part of it, at least, huge part of it. And the moral economy. So I want to go back to Samuel Bowles. Give them a look at. I only started like watching 40 minutes into one of his lectures, but it's really good stuff. So I had that on the screen before. He points out that from Machiavelli up until the present, the whole paradigm has been nerds, rule of the nerds, like good laws replaced good citizens. And this guy Bowles Samuel Bowles doing some great research showing that whole paradigm is just false. That good laws cannot replace good citizens, and you need you have much better results in just raw economic terms if you have a good moral citizens who are altruistic and cooperative. The whole paradigm of the market and competition, like people just doing things out of their own self-interest, will naturally give good outcomes. The butcher, the baker, that sort of thing. It turns out that just was a fairy story all along. It's totally false. And it's only very recent research that has become aware that the common old wisdom of altruism, cooperation, actually turns out to be the correct story if you want good social outcomes. So a whole lot of greedy agents does not make a beautiful economy. It makes a greedy economy. You get increasing returns to wealth and decreasing returns to poverty.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
I think we're getting near the end.
I think I'm going to have to go soon.
You're going to have to go.
I'm getting worried. I'm going to get roasted.
Yeah.
I have to come up with some soundproofing next week.
I'm excited to hear about. I'm gonna have to check. I haven't maybe 2 podcasts behind on the Applied MMT podcast, but Hugh Grant was looking into MMT. If I'm not mistaken, Hugh Grant was the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, correct?
Yeah, that's right. He was a parallel Prime Minister to Tony Blair. High profile.
Well, he dated.
Oh
crap!
God,
who was his girlfriend? And,
I don't know. No, I can't remember all that stuff.
What movie am I thinking of? I'm thinking of Love Actually.
Love Actually.
Yeah. God, that's kind of cringy. That's what came to mind.
Wow, we've got wives, we've got girlfriends.
Let's see. Yeah, we can get wrapping it up. If anyone has any questions,
one other thing that I regularly have a think
thanks,
about.
Josh. I appreciate that. Yeah. I'll check that out. Oh, yeah, you did say you heard it from the MMT podcast. Oh, I read that wrong. Go ahead, Bijou.
Yeah, it's not something that I'd tweet about, but maybe, I don't know. Maybe if there's more data. So this is sort of more like a bunch of anecdotes. But you got to think to yourself, like, okay, so from my background, people that I often talk to do place some stock in good behavior, morals, good ethics, and that sort of thing. So it's not moralizing in the neoliberal sense of, eat your peas and so forth. It's just being a good person. It's a decent sort of homely, wholesome sort of morality that people have. And when you have that sort of perspective, okay, this is without being all sort of super liberal woke or anything. It's just I just want to bring it down to earth for a start. Just really down earth, plain, ordinary, nice people that you could meet in your neighborhood. Okay, what would you say if you had a discipline that was dominated by men and a discipline that had a diverse bunch of people working in it, a lot of women leaders in it? Okay, that's MMT. There's a lot more women economists. This is just anecdotal. This is just what I see, right? I'm not saying it's hard data, but that's just something to think about. MMT attracts all sorts of people, and it also happens to be gender diverse, I think, in a way that neoclassical orthodox mainstream economics isn't. And you can look at the departments, just look at the university departments for that, and also look at Claudia Sam, who used to work, I think, at the Fed, and her stories that she tells about incredible, misogyny and so forth. So in the economics profession. So that's just something to think about. I thought
it is interesting. Yeah,
it's totally qualitative, totally spiritual sort of data, but it's nice. It's nice to sort of have that as well as all the hard numbers and time series and all the analysis as well.
Yeah,
just a thought.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
We've also got Mike Norman on our side too. So
he is one of us.
Yeah.
Wait, who was smart and left Twitter? That's not a smart move. Twitter's where the fun.
Some
happens.
people go in and out of Twitter, to be honest.
Yeah.
They say they've had enough, and then the next week I see them back on.
Well, it's like a good drug. All right, I think we've exhausted all topics for this week.
Yeah, kind of. So,
yeah, I think we can
do an
wrap
outro.
It up. Yeah.
Do anything else to wrap up?
Let me think real quick. Yeah, if somehow you've made it here and you're not subscribed, get subscribed. And if you're not on Twitter, follow me on Twitter. Got some good stuff showing up there. I will eventually get a video posted soon too as well, that goes over, if you're not a big Twitter person, that will go over my findings and in terms of what I did post on the model. And then again, just a reminder, Saturday I'll be on with Ty and Steve Keen, so check me out over there. All right, I'm gonna wrap it up and give it over to Bijou to close us out.
All right, I think I got a Mike Norman I could do. We go like this, something like this: great conquering Normans, Douglas. Will the Brooklyn Badger of MMT escape the iron cage of the YouTube neoclassical algorithm? Or will Mike the Mocker Norman leap over the viper pit of right-wing commentary and explode into the CNBC in a machine gun blaze of tax-driven violence? Find out next week if the CNBC stooges still have their cerebral hemispheres disconnected, or whether Mike Norman's free surgical clinic did a socialism on them, making their brains whole again. Find out next week. Same MMT time, same MMT channel.
I love it.
See you all.
I love it. See you guys next week.